Moving into my top five offensive tackles, I think this is one of the most deepest positions that we have in the draft. There's a lot of guys who would see in this entire class of offensive tackles become probably stars or guys you're going to recognize a couple of years down the road. But my top five is number one, starting with USC's Matt Khalil. Um, Brother to probably one of the best centers in all of football, Ryan Khalil. Uh, you see that he has the lineage there. He has the bloodlines of being a great lineman. He's one of the best left tackle prospects I've seen in a while. Uh, Pass protection, his feet, his footwork, his feet, his technique. He's just a pure out technician, and he's actually getting stronger as his years go on. He's a young kid. I love his footwork, especially in pass protection. Gets great hand placement. Very good first punch. Very good power in his punch. Uh, Very great at angles. Helps out. Very smart football player. I really liked him a lot because last year's top 10 pick from USC, Tyrone Smith, who was 8 overall to the Cowboys, they had to move Tyron Smith over to right tackle because of the fact that that Matt Khalil was just so good at that position. So having those 2 years ago at USC, you're talking about just two of the great tackles that you'll see. But sometimes the things that he has to work on a little bit is his run blocking. Sometimes he stands up too high and he doesn't get good. He doesn't get great leverage or great punch off of his, especially getting to the second level or sealing inside on a run block. He sometimes gets outpowered, so he has to work on that. But other than that, if he's just a flat out bona fide top five pick, I think he's the best. He's the best lineman that's going to be in this draft. Out of all interior or the tackle position, he's the best lineman. He'll definitely be a top five pick. Probably going to go to the Minnesota Vikings at 3 to replace Brian McKinney. They need a replacement for him. Going to number 2, I had a toss-up between these guys. They're all three of them kind of bunched in the same group, so it's kind of like a 2A, B, and C. But I'm going with Jonathan Martin first from from Stanford. Like I said earlier about David DeCastro and Andrew Luck, those guys were basically the cornerstones of that team turning it around. That program turning it around. A very good, solid prospect across the board when it comes to footwork, being a technician. He has to get a little bit stronger, I believe. I think that the full out potential that you'll see in Matt Khalil is not there, but he has somewhat of a very good upside. But what you saw a lot from Stanford, I think, is the most you're going to see. Like, he can improve, but I think he's just a very good, solid prospect across the board who's going to be definitely a top 15 to 20 pick. Riley Ralph from Iowa is my number 3 or 2A, if you want to call him that. He's a guy that is very versatile. Somebody who he did get in a lot of trouble off the field at Iowa, but also a very good, solid football player. He can definitely play left tackle as well as right, or he can either play guard inside. He's that versatile of a football player. Very good footwork, dancing bear, a guy who could play well in space. Uh, Smart football player, which is always expected especially from a left tackle, just knowing where you're supposed to be at some points and times. Very good hand placement. He gets a very good first power punch, and he's a guy who I think is definitely going to be another first rounder. And number 4 or 2B, if you want to call him, I got Mike Adams from Ohio State. The thing about Mike Adams is really tricky. He was involved in the suspension thing and the tattoo gate at Ohio State, and he was involved in the play, so he's got suspended for most of the year. But I think that he's the guy that has the most greatest potential, I think, behind Matt Khalil in this whole draft. He's a guy who I think that he's a first round pick. Very good size, about 6'5", 6'6". He has a real issue with consistency. Sometimes he could look like he's the best football player on the team, and then sometimes he'll get beat on another game and against a lesser opponent or something, and you'll look at him and like, oh, is he really first round worthy? But I think I'll take the risk on him, get him behind a good offensive line coach, get him behind a good offensive coordinator who can help his skills out. But I think that he's definitely a guy who's top 5 in my opinion, and who could probably be in a late first round pick. But I would actually make the jump and make the risk of taking him in the top 15, especially if I need a left tackle for the future. Maybe he's not ready to, good enough to play right away at the left tackle spot. Maybe you can move him at right for right now. But I think that he's a guy, once he gets on the field and he gets back into that football mode, I think he's going to be a very good player. And I think a Pro Bowl type player for him for years to come. My number 5 guy is Bobby Massey from Ole Miss. Very raw. He's the most rawest out of potential stand-wise. Very good potential. Still raw. Still developing his skills at left tackle. But he has the best, tremendous size, tremendous just from the outside tools, just from the physical standpoint. Very long arms. Very powerful punch. Needs to work on his technique a little bit. I think he's strong enough to handle left tackle. Or he can maybe play right tackle, I think, to start off if you want to get him on the football field, if he's one of your best top 5 linemen. But he's a guy who could start off at right tackle who can eventually transfer over to left. Once you work on his footwork, you work on his technique. But he's a guy, like I said, who's a dancing bear. He's a guy that you always think that will always help out. And if it comes to chipping, he doesn't need really help for chipping. Guy, he doesn't really get beat off of speed rushes, which is really key for him. And I just think that going on, I think he's going to be a guy you should really watch out for. My biggest faller is going to be Nate Potter from Boise State. He was a guy, top 5, who I believe that I thought he was a guy who's going to be one of the top probably a first round pick. But I saw a couple of films. There was films where he was getting just pass rushed. He was just getting passed on by pass rushers with great speed. Or he was sometimes, if he was playing against a 34 type of scheme, that he would get outpowered by a 5 technique. So going back on a couple of films, and I just saw that he really struggled from just if it was going against a speed rusher or if it was going against a 34 or 5 technique defensive end, and he would really struggle against with those guys who power. My underrated value guy is going to be Andrew Dacko from Florida State. I think he was a guy last year, if he would have came out, I think he would have been a late first rounder. Got hit by the injury bug and this season, and it really dropped his stock down. So he's a guy that you'll probably see in the 3rd, 4th round. And I think that he could be a really solid guy and hopefully become one of those guys that I thought that he was last year's, but one of the best tackles in the draft if he would have came out last year. And my sleeper pick is a guy, Josh Oglesby from Wisconsin. Another Wisconsin guy, another Wisconsin lineman, a huge kid, 6'7", 330 pounds. The reason why I call him a sleeper is because he's dealt with injuries his whole career at Wisconsin. And I think that for a guy who was one of the best kids coming out of high school, not just linemen, but overall players, I think a lot of guys, he was top 5 player coming out of high school. And I think that just his ability, I think that if he can finally stay healthy and he could be able to harness all the tools that he has, I think he could be a very tremendous right tackle for a team. Very powerful, very good footwork for his size. And I think that work on his technique a little bit, become more of a technician, and finally put all those tools together that he can. I think you have a very good football player at the right tackle spot. But my top 5 is Matt Khalil, Jonathan Martin, Riley Ralph, Mike Adams, and Bobby Massey. So let me know if I forgot anybody that you thought that was a little bit better. How was your top 5 jumbled out? Who's your sleeper? And I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.